It started with a text. Just one. From a number I hadn't saved, but knew instantly. Hey. Just checking in. Hope you're okay. It shouldn't have hit me that hard. But it did. Because the person sending it had walked away without a word 3 months ago. No goodbye. No closure. Just silence. And now, with 7 words, he cracked open a wall I'd spent weeks rebuilding. I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered, then lowered. My heartbeat thumped in my ears. I swallowed hard and locked my phone without replying. My hand was shaking. I sat down on the floor. Not the couch. Not the bed. The floor. Because that's where I always ended up when the weight was too much. And this? This was too much. I hadn't cried in weeks. Not since the day I lost my job, not since the phone call with my mom that ended in silence, not since I told Jules, my roommate, that everything's fine while my mouth tasted like lies. I had held it all in. Until now. Until a single stupid text made it all unravel. Benny was in the other room. I heard his paws on the hardwood, the soft, rhythmic tap that always followed me when I moved. He was never far. He never let me be far. I think he knew that sometimes I got stuck in my head and forgot how to come back. When he padded into the room, I was already curled up with my forehead on my knees, breathing like someone who'd run a marathon she hadn't trained for. Benny paused in the doorway. Then, without a sound, he rushed toward me. And that's when it happened. The thing I'll never forget. He started licking me. At first, it was just my hand. Gentle. Soft. Warm. But when I didn't move, didn't respond, didn't say anything, he panicked. He started licking my arms, my shoulder, my cheek, my forehead, frantic and uncoordinated, like he was trying to wake me up. I tried to speak, to tell him to stop, but the words caught in my throat. I didn't even realize I was crying until his tongue dragged across a tear. And then? I lost control. Not in a scary way. Not in a way that needed to be stopped. In a real way. In a necessary way. I laughed and sobbed at the same time. My body shook with it. My lungs didn't know if they were supposed to cry or wheeze or scream or laugh, so they did all of it. I dropped backward onto the floor, staring at the ceiling, hands over my face. Benny stood over me, his whole body wagging, tongue out, eyes wide. He looked ridiculous. And somehow, that made everything come loose. "You're too much," I whispered through tears. He leaned down and licked my nose. "Seriously," I gasped, "what is wrong with you?" "Lick. Lick." His tail thumped against the floor like a drumroll. I wiped my face with the sleeve of my hoodie. "I'm not okay, Benny. I'm not okay." He didn't respond. Of course he didn't. He's a dog. But he lay down beside me and placed his head on my chest, pressing just hard enough to remind me, "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." We stayed there for a long time. Just breathing. Him steady. Me shaky. My fingers curled into the fur around his neck like I was afraid of floating away without something to anchor me. I didn't think I'd ever be the kind of person who could break down like this. I was the one who held it together, the fixer, the cheerful one. The "you're so strong" one. But Benny didn't need strong. He needed honest. And in that moment, so did I. Eventually, I sat up. My face was red and blotchy. My throat sore. My eyes puffy. Benny sat, too, still close, still touching. I looked at him and said, "Do you always do that when people cry?" His head tilted. It was the kind of look that felt like both a question and an answer. "I didn't ask you to," I whispered. "But you came anyway." He blinked slowly. I reached for his ear, scratched gently, and said the thing I hadn't been able to admit to anyone else. "Thank you." Later that night, I told Jules what happened. She was sitting cross-legged on the bed, eating popcorn out of a mixing bowl. "So, you sobbed, and he licked you like a popsicle?" "Yes," I said. Like he was trying to erase the sadness molecule by molecule. She laughed. "I mean, it's weird. But kind of amazing." It was too much. I couldn't stop laughing. "Maybe that's the point." I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Jules shrugged. "He made you lose control, yeah? Maybe that's exactly what you needed. To lose it for a second. To stop holding on so tight." I looked down at Benny, curled at my feet, snoring softly. And I realized she was right. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not in the insomnia way. In the my mind won't stop unpacking what just happened way. The text was still sitting on my phone, unread, unanswered. But I wasn't thinking about him anymore. I was thinking about Benny. About the way he seemed to know. About how he didn't try to fix it with words or walk away awkwardly like most people do when someone starts crying. He just came in, licked me senseless, and said without saying, "You don't have to be okay for me to love you." And that broke something in the best possible way. The next morning, I woke up with a heavy head and a light chest, a strange combination, like I'd been crying in my sleep but dreaming of something soft. Benny was on the bed, or, more accurately, half on the bed. His hind legs dangled off the side like he hadn't quite figured out how big he was. His head was inches from mine, and when I opened my eyes, he was already staring at me. Not blinking, not breathing heavily, just watching. "You're creepy," I whispered, my voice still scratchy from yesterday's meltdown. He blinked once. And then, licked my forehead. "Seriously?" He didn't move. Didn't even wag his tail. Just gave me this look, the same one he always gave me when I was spiraling or quiet or pretending everything was fine. A look that said, "I see you." And then, as if his mission was complete, he jumped down and padded into the hallway. It wasn't until I was halfway through a very burnt piece of toast that I realized just how often he did that. The licking. The staring. The quiet surveillance like he was my emotional security guard. He didn't beg for food. Didn't whine at the door. Didn't bark unless someone knocked. But the second my mood shifted, even slightly, he reacted. I dropped a spoon, muttered ugh, and he was there, licking my ankle like I'd just suffered a trauma. When I tripped over a laundry basket and said, "I'm fine," in a tone that clearly said I wasn't, he brought me a sock from the hallway. And when I tried to journal later that afternoon and couldn't get a single word down, he pressed his chin onto my notebook and stared at me like, "Maybe don't write. Just feel." I decided to test it. At first, casually. I sighed dramatically while sitting on the floor. Nothing. Then I fake whimpered once. Boom. Benny was in my lap, tongue out, paws flailing. Okay, I thought. That's not normal. I started researching later that night, searching things like why does my dog lick me when I cry and dogs who react to emotions. What I found wasn't shocking, but it was oddly comforting. Apparently, some dogs, especially those with traumatic or emotionally intense pasts, can develop a kind of emotional radar. It's not just about tone of voice or routine. It's deeper. Instinctive. They watch your face, your body language, your energy. Some of them even learn to predict breakdowns before they happen. Was Benny one of those? Had he been trained? Or was he just, like this? And if so, why? I was still scrolling when Jules walked in from her shift at the bookstore. She kicked off her shoes and plopped onto the couch beside me. "You look like you're trying to crack a conspiracy," she said. "I might be." She leaned over to glance at my screen. "Oh. The dog thing? You knew?" She laughed. "Sophie, he's been licking your face during emotional moments for months." "Yeah, but not like this." I told her about the meltdown. The full-on floor cry. The licking spree. The way he reacted to everything I did today. She nodded slowly. You know, that dog's seen stuff. What do you mean? I mean, the shelter didn't tell you much, right? But I remember when you first brought him home, he used to sit by the window like he was waiting. Like he thought someone else was coming. I frowned. I thought he was just adjusting. Maybe. Or maybe he's still carrying someone with him. That idea hit me harder than I expected. It made something in my chest twist. Because I knew what that felt like, to carry someone long after they were gone. To sit by the window. To hope. That night, I dug through the adoption folder I'd practically ignored when I brought Benny home. There wasn't much inside: a receipt, a vaccination record, a short intake form, and one scrap of handwritten paper tucked in the back. Benny, surrendered by local hospice center. Fostered briefly before transfer. Hospice. That word made my breath hitch. Someone had loved him at the end of their life. And now, he was loving me through something else ending. The next morning, I emailed the shelter. Just one line. Do you have any info on Benny's foster family? I'd like to learn more about where he came from. I hit send before I could overthink it. Because suddenly, I needed to know. Who had taught Benny to respond to sadness like it was his job? Who had he licked before me? Who had he waited for? And why did I feel like he'd been saving that part of himself for someone who needed it again? A few days passed. The shelter replied with a short message. Benny was fostered by a retired nurse named Sandra Milton. We've forwarded your message to her. If she's comfortable, she'll be in touch. I didn't expect much. But I waited anyway. And in the meantime, Benny stayed the same. Watching. Licking. Loving. One evening, I burned dinner, again, and flopped on the couch in a cloud of smoke and shame. I can't even make pasta, I groaned. Benny jumped up beside me and dropped something on my lap. I looked down. It was my hoodie sleeve. Just the sleeve. He'd chewed it off months ago and kept it under the bed, apparently. You brought me trash? I asked, laughing. He wagged his tail. And licked my hand. I let out a breath. And leaned into him. By the end of the week, I received a letter. Not an email. Not a text. A letter, hand-addressed, with a small return label from a town 2 hours away. I opened it slowly, carefully, like it might contain a part of Benny I hadn't met yet. Inside was a short note, written in careful cursive. Dear Sophie. I'm so happy Benny has found someone like you. He came to me after his former owner, Mr. Elias, passed away. Mr. Elias was in the early stages of Alzheimer's when they brought Benny into his room. At first, he didn't respond to much. But Benny would sit by his side and gently lick his hands or cheek. It became a ritual, a way to bring him back when his mind drifted. The doctors said it was a coincidence, but I don't believe that. Benny knew. He knew when Mr. Elias was slipping, and he found a way to bring him home. When Elias passed, Benny stopped eating for days. But when I cried for the man I'd cared for too, Benny licked my face until I laughed. That's how I knew he was ready to move on, and help someone else. Looks like that someone was you. With warmth, Sandra. I read it twice. Then a third time. Tears welled in my eyes, but I didn't fight them. Benny was beside me in seconds. Licking. Softly. Gently. The same way he had for someone else, once upon a time. And I let him. Because now I understood. He wasn't licking me out of confusion, he wasn't trying to fix me. He was reminding me that I was here, that I was real, that even when I disappeared into myself, someone was waiting to bring me back. The road to Sandra's house wound through soft green hills and pockets of forest that looked like they hadn't changed in 50 years. It felt like driving back in time. I had no idea what I was expecting, a quiet visit, a few polite words, maybe a cup of tea if we clicked, but my heart wouldn't stop racing. Not because I was nervous about Sandra. Because I was nervous about what Benny might remember. What I might feel, standing in the place that used to be his home. The place he learned to love the way he does. He was calm in the car. Usually he got a little restless once we left the city, but not this time. He sat in the back seat, head on the armrest, ears forward. Like he knew where we were going. And like he wanted to go. Sandra's house was small and painted light blue, with shutters the color of butter and a porch wrapped in flowers that grew in messy harmony. The kind of place that looked lived in, loved in. She stepped onto the porch as I pulled up, already smiling. She wore a long cardigan, jeans, and a pair of faded sneakers. Her hair was gray, short, and wild in a way that made me instantly trust her. And Benny? Benny froze when he saw her. Not afraid. Not excited. Still. Completely, reverently still. Sandra stepped off the porch and walked toward us slowly. "Hello there, beautiful boy," she said softly. And that's when Benny moved. Not like he did with me. Not in a mad dash or a tail-wagging sprint. But in a slow, deliberate walk, ears low, tail swaying just once. When he reached her, he pressed his head against her knee. Sandra's hand trembled slightly as she stroked his ears. "You remember, don't you?" she whispered. And Benny looked up at her, eyes soft, steady. My throat tightened. Inside, the house smelled like lemon balm and old wood. The walls were lined with framed photographs, not posed portraits, but candid shots of people laughing, hugging, sitting on porches and swinging in hammocks. "He used to lie right there," Sandra said, pointing to a faded patch of carpet in the corner near the fireplace. "Every night after dinner, like clockwork." I nodded. "Mr. Elias?" She smiled, eyes growing distant. "Harold." He hated being called Mr. I sat on the couch, Benny curling up at my feet. Sandra brought over 2 cups of tea and settled into the armchair opposite me. "I don't think I ever properly thanked you for writing," she said. "I should be thanking you," I replied. "You helped me understand him." Her smile grew soft. "I didn't do anything. That dog came into this world knowing how to love people. All I did was witness it." She told me about Harold. How he'd started forgetting little things, names, places, faces. How the hospice team suggested a comfort animal. How Sandra had fostered dogs before, but never one like Benny. "He walked in, looked around, and went straight to Harold," she said. "Didn't sniff, didn't circle. Just sat at his feet like he belonged there." Benny shifted at my feet as if reacting to the memory. "He used to lick Harold's hands when he got lost in his own mind," she continued. "I think the touch grounded him. Brought him back." "That's what he does for me," I whispered. She nodded. "Because that's what he was born to do." For a moment, we were quiet. Just the sound of birds outside and the soft tick of a clock on the wall. Then Sandra said something I hadn't expected. "You know, Harold didn't say much toward the end. But the last thing I ever heard him say, it was because of Benny." I leaned forward. "He was having a bad night," she explained. "Pacing. Confused. He didn't know where he was." I tried talking, but nothing helped. Then Benny walked over, licked his hand like he always did, and sat on his foot. She paused, her eyes glistening. "And Harold just looked down and said, 'Still here, huh?'" I swallowed hard. "Still here," I repeated. She looked at me. "That's what he tells you, isn't it?" I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. "Every time I fall apart." We spent the afternoon in quiet conversation, not heavy, not sad. Just real. Sandra showed me an old photo of Harold and Benny, sitting on the porch swing together. Harold had a blanket over his legs. Benny's head rested in his lap. I asked if I could take a photo of it. Sandra said, "Take the original. I've got the memory." When I stood to leave, Benny walked toward the door without hesitation. But before we left, he turned back. And walked to the fireplace. To that patch of carpet. He sat there for a moment. Still. Present. Then walked back to me. Sandra walked us to the car and hugged me like we'd known each other for years. You don't have to understand all of it, she said. Just let him love you. I nodded, tears burning behind my eyes. I will. The drive home was quiet. But not heavy. Benny sat upright the whole time, ears flicking at every passing car, his eyes scanning the horizon like he was watching the road for someone, or maybe just watching me. When we got home, I placed the photo of Harold and Benny on the bookshelf above my desk. And when I sat down on the floor, not for any reason, just because it felt right, Benny came to me and licked my cheek once. Slow. Gentle. Grounding. I laughed, wiped my face, and whispered, "Still here, huh?" His tail wagged. That night, I wrote in my journal for the first time in weeks. He remembers love like it's a language. Point one that never needed words. He doesn't lick to fix. He licks to remind. That I'm still here, that I'm not lost, that even if the world forgets me, he won't. Asterisk. Before I went to bed, I sat next to Benny on the couch and pressed my forehead to his. Thank you for carrying that love forward, I whispered. He sighed, that deep, old man sigh he always gave when everything was right in the world. And I realized something else then. Something big. He wasn't just my emotional support dog. He was my bridge. Between the me who had been holding it all in and the me who was finally learning to let it out. There's a kind of peace that comes after understanding. Not the kind that makes everything better, but the kind that makes it all make a little more sense. After visiting Sandra and learning about Harold, about how Benny used to sit with him during his confusion, how he licked his hands to bring him back to the moment, I felt something shift in me. A permission. A softness. An invitation I'd been ignoring. To fall apart, on purpose. Before, my breakdowns came like hurricanes, sudden. Violent. Uninvited. But now? Now I wondered what would happen if I let go before the storm hit. What if I stopped trying to be okay? What if I gave myself the space to feel everything I'd buried? The job I'd lost. The silence from the people I used to trust. The version of myself I hadn't seen in months. I didn't plan it. I didn't schedule a cry on my calendar. It just happened. It was raining again, soft and steady like before. The kind of rain that makes the air smell like memory. I was folding laundry, something painfully mundane, when I found the shirt. It was one of his. Long sleeves, navy blue, still slightly stretched at the cuffs. I had Amadex. Just him. His soft paws on the floor, his warm breath on my arm, his body curling around mine like a weighted blanket made of fur and memory. And then he started licking me. Not playfully. Not wildly. Slow. Deliberate. He licked the tears off my cheeks, then the sweat from my brow, then the back of my hand, over and over, like he was scrubbing the grief away with each swipe. I didn't stop him. I didn't flinch. I let him. Because now I understood what he was doing. He wasn't trying to fix me. He was keeping me here. Tethered. Grounded. Loved. At some point, I started laughing. Not because it was funny, but because the absurdity of crying so hard your dog starts grooming your face like a cat was too much not to laugh at. And once the laughter started, the crying softened. And then the two swirled together, laughter and grief and gratitude, until they became something new entirely. Something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. I leaned into Benny, wrapped my arms around him, and whispered the truth I had never said aloud. I'm scared. He licked my neck. I don't know what I'm doing. Another lick. I feel like I'm failing. He stopped licking, just pressed his head against my shoulder. And I don't know if I'm ever going to feel like myself again. He exhaled, that long, slow sigh that said, me neither, but we're doing it anyway. We stayed there for a long time. The rain kept falling, the laundry remained unfolded, the shirt lay in a pile on the floor, finally just fabric again, no longer carrying the weight I'd assigned it. And I felt clean. Not fixed. Not whole. Just clean. Like the inside of me had been rinsed out by tears and love and Benny's persistent, slobbery devotion. That night, I didn't journal. I didn't light a candle. I didn't do anything symbolic or poetic. I just sat on the floor and watched Benny sleep. His paws twitched, his tail flicked, he made those little dream woofs that always made me smile. And I whispered, "Thank you for letting me fall apart." He didn't wake up. But I think he heard me. The next morning, something strange happened. I looked in the mirror and saw myself. Not the version I had been pretending to be, not the person I thought I should be, just me. Tired. Messy. But me. I made coffee. I opened the windows. I took a breath that didn't feel like a chore. And when Benny walked into the room, I got down on the floor, just because. He came over immediately, tail wagging. And I laughed. "You think I'm sad again, huh?" He licked my chin. "Wrong. I'm good today." He licked me again. "Okay, fine, I'm almost good." Tail thump. And we stayed like that, just breathing. I started letting myself feel things after that. Not just sadness, joy, too. I let myself smile at silly things, let myself cry during a commercial, let myself feel proud when I fixed the broken lamp without asking Jules for help. And Benny was always there. Not always licking. Sometimes just watching. Sometimes just sleeping nearby. But always ready. In case I needed to fall apart again. And I did. Of course I did. Because healing isn't a straight line. Some days I laughed before breakfast, other days I cried before coffee. But now, I wasn't afraid of those days. Because I knew I didn't have to go through them alone. I had Benny. And Benny had me. And between the two of us, we had enough love, and enough licks, to make it through. The sun came up like it always did, warm, slow, golden. But something felt different. The world outside my window looked the same, the neighbors' kids on scooters, the mail truck lurching to a stop, the tree with the bent trunk in front of apartment 4C. But inside me? There was space again. Not silence, not numbness, space. For joy. For change. For me. And that morning, as I poured coffee into my favorite chipped mug, I looked down and realized Benny wasn't underfoot like usual. He wasn't watching me from the hallway or flopped across the rug like a loaf of fur. He was gone. "Benny?" I called out, softly at first. "Nothing." I checked the living room. Nothing. The bedroom? Not there. My chest tightened, not with panic, not yet, but with a growing edge of worry. "Benny!" I said louder. That's when I heard it. A soft thud. Then a shuffle. From the bathroom. I walked quickly and pushed the door open. And there he was. Sitting in the tub. Staring at the faucet. Like it owed him an answer. "Okay," I said, already laughing, "what are we doing in here?" He looked at me with wide, innocent eyes. Then let out a single sneeze. "I swear, you get weirder every day." He didn't move. I sat down on the closed toilet seat and crossed my arms. "Well, I guess I should tell you," I said. "I have some news." At the sound of my voice shifting, that half-nervous, half-excited tone, Benny perked up. "I got the job," I said. He stood. Tail twitching. Like, the job I really wanted. The one that felt too big for me. Too real. Benny stepped out of the tub, walked across the tile, and sat in front of me. I smiled. "You're gonna have to get used to me leaving the house again." He licked my knee. Then, without warning, he bolted into the bedroom. I followed, already guessing what was about to happen. And I was right. He returned with a slipper in his mouth. Then a sock. Then, God help me, a bra. Benny, no. Too late. He dropped all three on my lap, then jumped up onto the bed and grinned. I laughed so hard I dropped my coffee. It splashed across the carpet, but I didn't care. Because I was laughing, deep, from the gut, tear streaming kind of laughing, and Benny was dancing around like a happy maniac, thrilled that his chaos had once again brought me back from wherever I'd gone. He jumped off the bed and pressed himself into my legs, panting, licking my arm, tail wagging like it might lift him off the floor. "You're ridiculous," I said, breathless. "You're too much." He leaned his full weight against me and sighed. The next day, I went in for my first shift. It was strange, walking back into a work environment after so much stillness. But it was good. The kind of good that felt earned. My new coworkers were kind. The office smelled like fresh paint and too many plants. I found myself smiling at the smallest things, the coffee machine, the sound of clicking keyboards, the dumb poster on the break room wall that said "You got this," with a cartoon dinosaur. I wasn't faking it. Not this time. After work, I came home and sat on the floor the moment I walked through the door. It had become our ritual. My way of saying, "I'm home. I'm here." "And Benny?" He came running. No sock this time. No surprise bra. Just him. All of him. He curled into my lap and licked the corner of my eye, just once, then rested his chin on my shoulder. And for a long time we just sat. Like we always had. Like we always would. 2 weeks later, I got a call from my mom. I almost didn't answer. But something told me to pick up. Her voice was soft. Uncertain. We hadn't talked properly in months. "I read your post," she said. "The blog one. The story about the breakdown. The licks. The laughter. The healing." "I didn't know," she said. "I didn't realize how hard it had gotten." "I didn't either," I replied. A pause. "I'm proud of you," she said. That's when the tears came. Soft. Safe. "And Benny?" He came running. That night, I sat on the porch with him beside me, the sky painted in streaks of tangerine and lilac. I was journaling again. Drawing again. Singing off-key again. Living again. And every time I caught my breath from laughter, every time I slowed down from a rush of happiness or sadness or anything in between, Benny would lift his head, wag his tail, and wait. For me to sit. To soften. To let it in. And then he'd attack, with love. Always love. Weeks turned into months. The job became familiar. I made new friends. Went on long walks. Deleted old photos that no longer hurt. And through it all, Benny stayed exactly the same. Consistent. Loyal. Ridiculously affectionate. And always ready. One afternoon, I met up with Jules at the park. We sat under a tree, watching Benny roll in the grass like a wild beast. "He looks happy," she said. "He is happy," I said. "He finally got a project that listens to him." She laughed. "You're not his project." "No," I said. "I'm his person." And that felt right. That night, I tripped over his toy on the way to the kitchen and stubbed my toe hard enough to let out a yelp. Instantly, Benny came charging in. Not to lick my toe. But to lick my face. Full assault. All tongue. No shame. I burst out laughing, collapsed onto the floor, and gasped, "I'm fine, you maniac." He didn't stop. I gave up, flopping backward on the floor, tears in my eyes, but this time from joy. "You bring me back every time," I whispered. And he did. From sadness. From numbness. From doubt. From everything. Because when I lose myself, when the world gets too loud, too fast, too much, he always knows what to do. He starts licking. and I lose control. In the best way.